To the Safer Communities Overview and Scrutiny meeting. Just to confirm, as a council, we welcome the use of the Welsh language within our public meetings, but I can confirm that I have not received any notification or requests to use Welsh language today. Therefore, the meeting will be conducted in English only. As a reminder, may I remind you that this meeting is being webcast. Therefore, can I ask that you turn off or silence your mobile phones and ensure you speak clearly into the microphone. For our invitees' information, in case of a fire drill, please follow the signs to exit the building and try not to use the lift. Can I remind all members to sign the attendance register and confirm if any apologies have been received for this meeting?
Chair, we've received apologies from Councillor Barry Taylor. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Could I ask if any members should now have any declarations of interest, that they declare them now?
Chair, I just state what may not be an interest, but is obvious that I'm current chair of the Planning Committee, and therefore, you may want to take that into account in relation to any comments I might make on the changes relating to plan.
I don't see a problem.
Yeah, yes, I think that's fine. That's just noted in the minutes, Chair. I don't believe there's actually an interest to be declared. Thank you.
Could I just mention, Chair, that I have to leave at about 3 o'clock for another appointment at the hospital, so could you just for 3 o'clock?
No problem. I'll note that.
Chairman, could I go back to declarations of interest? I did decline interest at the last meeting for planning, and I was told it wasn't prejudicial or personal. Does that, is it the same for this meeting as well?
Thank you, Chair. That was Scrutiny Committee again, Councillor Parish, was it? Yeah, my recollection is it wasn't personal or prejudicial in my view. That's correct, isn't it? Was our view. So there's no interest to declare there. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just thinking, should I declare if anything comes up about housing that I have actually got a property within Torfaen that is rented out?
Again, in relation to that one, Councillor Cameron, my view would be no, because the Scrutiny Committee is looking at the overall spread of matters throughout the borough, and I don't think on that basis it could be properly said to be a personal interest in that situation. Thank you.
Okay. If there's any other declarations, thank you, Tim. Okay, we move on to minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of February 2017. Just to remind members, these minutes relate to planning and review of the third-party speaking rights process. Please, could I ask members to scan through the minutes for accuracy and confirm that the minutes are an accurate account of the meeting. So, page 3, page 4, and page 5. Could someone forward those?
I'll move those, Chairman.
Move. Okay, thank you, Norma. And second? Is it? No, okay. No, you can't, no. Over to Chris for the action sheet.
Yes, Chair, the recommendations from the previous committee were sent to the executive member. I'm not sure, Leanne, if a response has been received as yet. Yes, a response has been received as well.
Yeah, I emailed members of the committee on the 3rd of March, I think it was.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, agenda item 5. This is an interesting one because there are actually 10 scrutiny items, so we have to be mindful that we won't spend 20 minutes on each one, otherwise we'll be here all day. However, the purpose of the report is to provide members with an update on the progress that has been made implementing scrutiny recommendations that have previously been accepted or considered by our executive member, Gwynaira Clark, who is present today. May I bring in Leanne to provide a brief overview of the report?
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair just pointed out, the purpose of the report is to provide you with an update on progress that's been made on recommendations put forward to the exec member previously. As mentioned within the report, WA's study of scrutiny in Wales 2012 identified that the impact of scrutiny was not always monitored by local authorities. So this is really our attempt now to address this. The appendix to the report sets out any recommendations that the committee has put forward since 2014, and updates have been provided by officers on progress for you to consider. Please note that any recommendations since this date that have been deemed to be fully embedded have been deleted from the monitor. Just as a final note, the Executive Member for Housing, Planning and Public Protection, plus Chief Officers have been invited to the meeting today to answer any questions that you may have, which will help you to determine whether sufficient progress has been made against recommendations previously put forward. So now it'll be up to you to just raise any questions with the appropriate officers and come up with your recommendations.
Thank you, Leanne. We're going to deal with each one on its own merits. We won't go right through it. Obviously, it's quite clear, you've all read the pack, that we've had the accepted recommendation and we've had the executive member response. We've had a number of updates on each one of these scrutiny items, but the one that interests us most at the moment is the 2017 update and the actual update and the impact delivered for 2017. And for scrutiny members today, we're looking to scrutinise the impact, timescales and progress detailed in the Safer Communities Overview and Scrutiny Commission recommendation update for each one of these. So you will be, they're in order of time rather than by officer to address, so you will be coming in and out with the questions and answers, if that's okay. And the first one is for Dave, and that one will be on the environmental enforcement options for future service delivery. So if you want to give us a little bit more on the update, if there's been anything since February.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. The first item goes back to a meeting of the Safer Scrutiny back in 2014, and really I didn't know whether you wanted to pick this up here or whether you wanted to pick this up later on, because a lot of the Kingdom initiative at that time was a discontinued. I think there was a tender process that was attempted at that time that was unsuccessful, and then the service was discontinued. When I came into post in October this year, we had another Safer Scrutiny then, which is reflected later on in the agenda. And so the actions really on the first item are the actions against that item, so it really depends where you want me to pick that up. Do you want me to pick that up now and wrap it all up in one, or should we pick it up after?
From my perspective, I think rather than go back to it and go over old ground, if we can just wrap up the Kingdom one all in one, so I'm happy for that.
Okay. If I can refer members then to the last item, which was the Safer Scrutiny we had in October, and members made recommendations as part of that. It was to recommence enforcement patrols within hotspot and dog fouling areas, and a review of the signage that we had available in the area, and to put more signage up, and then to review the dog control orders that are currently in place, because they will automatically be converted to public space protection orders under the new legislation. And then the final recommendation from scrutiny was to develop a comprehensive and sustainable enforcement strategy in the future, working with the community there. And we responded to there under the right-hand column there, and the executive member and officers, we all accepted the the principles of the scrutiny recommendations, and we've begun to work on those. As far as recommencing enforcement patrols, you'll see in the February 17 update on that, that's in progress in the sense that the authority, since scrutiny through the member choices budget that came through, has made 15,000 available for, because there was only a small amount available, members recalled it was hundreds. We've made 15,000 available for 2017-18 to do some proactive enforcement patrols in Torvine for dog fouling. And officers, we are now just finishing off our dialogue with Kingdom, the local authority enforcement service that operated here previously and currently operates in Gwent, and we hope to begin later this month or earlier in April. With regards to the signage, we were hoping to have that complete by now, but other things have got in the way of the officers have had to down tools and move on to other things on a number of occasions. Ironically, this week it's usually illegal encampments, and that's what it has been this week as well. There is a lot of signage which has already gone up in the area where we've been able to do it ourselves. In other words, where there's existing fence lines or gates around children's play areas and other opportunities just to affix signage. Staff are telling me, however, that in about 60 areas we're going to need to put posts up as well. Don't tell the planning people, but we are going to have to put posts up as well, and so we need to look into that. And I think the cost of that is about £100 or £200 per post potentially. So that's a £10,000 to £12,000 cost, and I'm working with the accountant to see if we can identify something end of year to enable to facilitate that. So that work is in progress. We've made a lot of progress on it, and officers are working on it today as we speak. I'm just waiting for the final numbers on the costs of those where we have to put the posts up. So there's progress being made there. And then really the final two, which was to look at the dog controllers and review them, because they're going to change the public space protection orders and put them back through scrutiny and council. That's in the work programme for 17-18. We put that into our work plan, and we intend to get that done by the October deadline. So that's there, and then to follow on from that will be options around the sustainable enforcement strategy, which, as we discussed in scrutiny, really, if it's going to be self-financing, would need to be a zero tolerance approach, not just to dog fouling, but to litter as well. So that's about where we are with that, Chair. Thank you very much. I'll take any questions.
Thanks for that, Dave. I mean, obviously for members, that was page 13 and page, it was covered in page 33 as well, which, so we've completed that. Gwynaira, is there anything you wish to add on the dog fouling side? Before
I'm just pleased to see that we are moving towards recommendations made earlier by scrutiny, because it is a real concern, and I hear members concerned about dog fouling all the time, and so I think this will go some way to alleviate that problem, but of course it is down to securing the finances, which I hope we can do.
Thank you, Gwynaira. On the finances side, I'll kick off the questions. With the signage, is that a separate budget for, other than the 15,000 that was earmarked for the first patrol? And has that patrol taken place yet? There's two questions.
The second one is we haven't done any patrols yet, but we're looking to do. We're still finishing off our discussions with Kingdom, but we do want to put them in place as soon as practicable at the start of the next financial year now. And the second question was around, is the 15,000 going to be used on the signage, I think, wasn't it, really? That's not my intention. That money was made available for patrols. So I've now got to find £10,000 or £12,000 to enable the signage. But I haven't got the final figures on that yet, and I'll be discussing that with the Chief Officer in due course. So yeah, it is a challenge that's emerged.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. We talked about this, and I'm just wondering, now that the new neighbourhood patrols are in place, and I have spoken to them, and I think they're doing a fantastic job already. But are you in contact with them? Are they having any feedback into this? Because they mentioned to me about the dog fouling that they're seeing. Are you actually liaising with them? Because we got the chance now. They're out in the areas.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we haven't linked in with them yet, but we intend to do so in the future once we can identify the officers from Kingdom who are going to come down and going to be doing the enforcement patrols.
Can I just ask, following on from that, when is the intention to do that?
The enforcement patrols will begin as we're still finishing off our dialogue with Kingdom and what resources they want that they're going to deploy in to the area. We're hoping to get an officer, at least one officer. We'll either have 2 officers patrolling 2 days a week, or maybe 1 officer, if Kingdom are happy for that from a health and safety perspective, patrolling 4 days a week. And then obviously the question is to link in, yes, which and as soon as we know, can I identify those people, I'll instruct the team manager for that area to link in with the neighbourhood patrols.
So in view of the fact that they are actually noticing and they know the bad spots, I think it would be good, before just going out starting the patrols, that you actually see what they say are the bad areas.
I've asked the team manager once we get a position in place to write to all members, just to see if there's any hotspot areas that they want to do, and obviously we'll link into cleansing there as well, and the neighbourhood patrols, as well as our own staff, to identify the hotspot areas.
Gwynneth?
Following on from that point, a very good point, because unless we actually speak to the people and meet with them that's actually delivering the service on the ground, then obviously we lose something, time and information. So that will certainly be taken up, and thank you for that point.
The development and comprehensive and sustainable enforcement strategy that you say you will explore working in collaboration with the Paws on Patrol and the Green dog walkers. Has any progress been made to date with that?
No, work plans haven't allowed that at the moment. That's really in our work plan for next year when we start to review the existing. We're putting signage up on the existing areas now, and then we will think into those sort of community organisations when we review when we actually review each area again to see if it's required.
You've explained to us about the signs. You've updated some signs, and you're looking for funding. I understand that. Is there a time scale when we can see it completed? You know, especially around the children play areas and sports fields.
I can't exactly indicate each individual one, but a lot of signage is already up now, as I indicated, because we've been able to attach them to existing structures. We're looking to get it completed as soon as we can, because if, for example, when they're patrolling for dog fouling and they're by an area that is a dog control area, we also, I assume, want them to enforce those areas as well, if it's incidental to the dog fouling patrol, but we can't do that unless the sign is up there. So I was looking for it as soon as possible, but we've been delayed by the post issues. So as soon as practicable, really.
On the dog exclusion areas, if the dog's there not fouling, then the fine is that the same as for dog fouling?
Yes, it is. Yeah, so obviously the main emphasis of the patrols will be for fouling, but I'm hoping that members would agree that if they witness other things whilst they're patrolling, even litter dropping as well, and dogs in areas that are excluded under dog control orders, then we would be requiring them to take enforcement action as appropriate.
I'm a dog owner myself, and I know there's areas in Cwmbran where if you're going past the sports fields, the dog has to be on the lead. is it the case where that, if that's a, is that a dog exclusion where the, you know, because it can be on the lead then, and as long as you got on the lead, there'll be no enforcement. But is there going to be areas where a dog is not allowed even on the lead?
Yeah, if it's excluded off the area. Yeah.
I keep coming in, Chair. But the point you just raised, very interesting, because I was at the Garn Lakes and with my dog, and I was going to take him around, and I saw the dog on a lead with the red circle, and I'm thinking, crikey, the dog is banned even on a lead. So it's a good point, that, because it's one that I didn't quite realise until you're actually walking your dog and you see the sign, you think, I can't go there with my animal. So that was a bit of a problem for me.
So you can't go to the Garn Lakes with
You can in certain areas, but there are areas there that are banned, and I was in one of those areas.
That poses another interesting point, whereby the communication of what is exactly the public, what's expected of the public, you might have a lot of unwelcome feedback, so to speak, where people may be confused, where they can have the dog on the lead, the dog's not allowed altogether, etc., etc. Because, are you anticipating that?
Pretty much guaranteeing it, really, but based on previous experience. Just a little bit about the public health reasons why these are dog exclusion areas. In my experience from other areas, then, is all I can draw on, as I've only been here since October. We used to get many so about people having to clear the rugby pitches of dog excrement before they can play a match, or even at worse, so somebody being dirtied by it during a match, really. So it's for public health reasons that we take it off sports pitches and also leisure areas also, really, because a dog may be on a lead, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that dog keeper is going to necessarily clean up after it in the proper manner or at all. So it is, we do need to be clear. So that is the public health, it's purely public health reasons around it. Your next question then, will we get complaints? You're absolutely right, this is why the signage is so important. And it's easy on, for example, children's play areas that are fenced off and bounded with a gate. You can put a sign up and it's pretty clear. My experience is that where you've got sort of areas around sports pitches which haven't been banned, haven't been subject to exclusion areas, then you need the appropriate signage with maps. And I think we discussed this in scrutiny, didn't we, about the maps. You need the appropriate signage at the official entrances to these places as well. And we had a problem, I had a problem elsewhere early on when it was first introduced, where all the signage was correct for the area, but there was a gap in the hedge which over the years had become an unofficial entrance to a certain area, and so people weren't seeing the signage. It became quite a high profile issue. But of course it wasn't an official entrance, so we had to consider with the landowners, who at the time was the Leisure Services Department, as to whether we should be cordoning those areas off and things like that. So it is a challenge, and we do get complaints, and it is something why the signage is very, very important. Just on the signage, what we're doing at the moment is putting up the existing signage that we've got. We talked around during the scrutiny October around perhaps we need mats with colour coding to areas about where people can go with dogs on leads, if we have dogs on leads areas and others. That's something when we review the signage again, when we bring in the new orders, we will need to take into account and make as clear as we can.
There's one other confusing, or potentially confusing one with the signage, is that it does say on some of the signs marked sports pitches, and obviously that relates mostly to football or rugby, and the football and rugby seasons go up to March, April, and then for the summer period, then their seasons ended, and the pitches are no longer marked. So is it deemed by the public then that those marked pitches are actually fields in respect, or are you still classing them? Pardon? Yeah, but they're not a marked pitch then?
It's a good question, obviously. No. If the signage is right and it's on a map, then it shouldn't really matter. You know, it should be as clear as we can make it. I take your point, but they're sports pitches and kids may still go on and play on them in their own time. And obviously training usually starts in the summer as well, anyway, doesn't it really? So we don't, in my experience, we've never put in time frames when it is and when it isn't. It either is or it isn't.
But my point is, it says marked sports pitches. Perhaps you need to remove the word marked, because by saying marked, when it becomes unmarked, then I know what the public are like, they will deem it to be an unmarked sports pitch, so that will be okay. So it should be carte blanche sport pitches. No other questions? We'll move on to the next scrutiny item, having covered the dog warnings. This is one for Neil. It's the housing self-evaluation pilot that went before committee. Obviously, we've all read the July 2015 update, the recommendations, the executive member response, the January 2016 update that's been public, and the impact delivered for 2016. We're now concerned with 2017. So the update for 2017 and the impact delivered, is there anything that you wish to add to that, Neil, or that's happened since?
No, I think it's probably worth just reminding ourselves, I suppose, what the self-evaluation exercise was all about. I think we received some feedback from partners that there were potential improvements that could be made in terms of partnering between the local authority, housing services, and RSL partners and other partners. So we conducted a survey, effectively, of our partners, sent them a questionnaire to complete, and received feedback on a range of different questions of what it felt like, I suppose, to work in partnership with Torban Housing Services, and were there any gaps, and could there be any improvements. We did have some significant feedback, and I think at the time I was very pleased to note that there was only one or two comments where suggested improvements could be made, and those were reflected in the action plan that was reported to Scrutiny Committee. Just to reiterate, I suppose, the fact is that the action plan has now been fully implemented. It has had a positive impact in terms of partnership working. I think improvements have been made. So there's nothing further to update, but I just thought it would be worthwhile, I suppose, reminding members of the committee of the exercise.
No, it's appreciated. Thanks, Neil. Gwynael, is there anything you wish to add? No? Members, do you have any questions on this particular scrutiny item?
Could I just ask, Chairman, the Home Seeker Steering Group continue to monitor feedback and comments from service users. Could you tell us briefly how the procedural changes are monitored or will be monitored?
Yeah, we send everybody who benefits from receiving any part of the housing service is sent a questionnaire subsequently, asking for their comments, the feedback to us, what it felt like for them, were there any potential areas for improvement, etc. So that includes, and we get the most feedback probably from Home Seeker and people coming through the homelessness service. Those are collated on a quarterly basis, those comments, and they are fed into the Home Seeker Steering Group. The Steering Group is made up of the Housing Service and our RSL partners. And then effectively we monitor the business plan and the Home Seeker policy. So all comments that are received about the Home Seeker service are collated and fed into the steering group. Any adverse comments there then obviously can result in reviews of certain aspects of the service or the policy, etc. And you members will remember that prior to Christmas we brought a report to Cabinet to make changes to the Home Seeker policy, and largely those changes were as a result of a range of different factors, but including feedback we received from customers.
One for Richard now. Performance of development control, which was the item was considered on the 29th of April 2015. Again, there were a number of accepted recommendations in response from Gwynaira in her executive role. Two updates, one July 15 and one January 2016, and which brings us up to last month's update, which is input into here, and the impact delivered for 2017. Would you like to give a little overview? Thanks, Richard.
Yeah, I think we reported, because the report was in 2015, we reported on our 15-16 performance, and that was generally very good. However, the main events of 2016, which is the introduction of a new Planning Act and going live with a brand new software system, a database for planning applications in June of last year, that's had significant impacts on resources. And I think because we've had a lot of difficulties with our new system, it's brought about technical difficulties, and that has impacted on our figures. Now, we've reported the Planning Committee and to the exec member that whilst the previous year's figures were very good, we're not expecting this year's, the 16-17 figures, when they're reported on after April, to be as good because of that, those events. But on the plus side, we needed to introduce a new system, so that was a very positive thing. And although it was hard work, and we had a lot of data cleansing issues and data transfer issues, overall the new system is better. It's just taken a long time to get used to the new way of working. But also, as part of that system, we've managed to get all our applications online now. So residents and anybody else can see all plan application details online and can actually submit comments online as well. So in terms of a plus and benefit point, that's been hugely successful. As part of the resources, we had appointed another planner on a temporary basis to cover a maternity leave, and because of our figures and our performance has dropped, and because of this issue with the new system, we've extended that contract up to September, and the lady on maternity leave is coming back in April, so we'll have a little bit of an extra resource for those months, and we're hoping to improve and get our backlog sorted over that period. That's probably bringing you up to date.
I'd just like to add, I think the planning and the staff do an excellent job, and given that they're so few in numbers, I think they do tremendous work. But what I would like to say, the new system seems to be working well, and I'm sure members will certainly notice that, and it is a change for efficiency, really. So I would hope that we can say it's successful now, more successful obviously than the last old system, but that members will understand why we needed to change. So, absolutely brilliant.
Thank you for that update, Gwynaira. I mean, I understand when you implement any new system there will be teething problems, but the objective is to make it more efficient for everybody in the future. And you're happy that that is now, would you say that's now really up and running properly as you would expect?
I wish I could say yes, but it's not quite there yet. We're getting there. We're being audited at the moment, internal audit, having a look at all our systems, and they're helping us put together the new procedures. So in the near future, I'm hoping to be able to say that we'll have ironed out all these glitches. A lot of them have been technical glitches, so we're relying on, the IT providers for that. But yeah, I'm confident that going forward, longer term, it's going to be a good system.
Has there been quite an uptake of users, obviously in members of the public, and has these changes had any adverse impact on finances, on the financial budget that you put aside for implementing it?
In terms of users, yeah, huge uptake in terms of looking at applications online, because we had a lot of visitors used to come in and look at the planning applications in the offices. People can do that online now,
and are using the facility for online, their representations, passing those to us online. There's been a big take-up on that as well. And the saving of that is huge, because if they do it online, it populates our system automatically, and they can submit applications online as well via that new system. So there's been a lot of benefits for that. In terms of the finances, we originally did a comparison between keeping with our current system and going with this new system. And because Monmouth were going with this new system as well, we felt there were some economies of scale. We could work with Monmouth, share servers, etc. So that's been, over a 5-year period, that will have been a benefit. It will be more cost effective to do that. But we are having to do some upgrading as a result, and some of it was unforeseen. They're covered in the budget, but it's going to cost us a little bit more in the next year, simply because of these upgrades that are necessary to improve the system, basically. But overall, yeah, we've got the finances to resource that.
We did talk about this earlier. Is there still provision? I know most people now are online, and that's how they do it, but there's still that bit of it's an age thing probably, people who still want to come and see you and look at plans. Is there still provision for that?
Yeah, people can still come in and look at hard copy plans if they want to, but we've got a terminal in the depot where we are, so people can come in and we help them look at the terminal and the plans. And we've got plans to put another terminal in as well, because it's quite heavily used. So there'll be 2 terminals at the building, and obviously at any other cyber points they can also get onto the internet. But yes, some people still like hard copies, and they will still be able to see those, yeah. Although I would say there's very few now coming in asking for hard copies. So.
Thanks, Chair. Just to reassure members, it might be worthwhile that if you wanted to, you come visit and you can see for yourself how the terminal actually helps people. Because you're absolutely right, not everyone is online, and we have to consider everybody.
Yes, you have a problem really with planning appeals because of the small numbers. Your percentages look great, and I understand why that's happening. And it, as you say, you know, in the report, you haven't got a large enough sample to present a true picture, really, of your performance. Can this be overcome in any way?
It is a problem, and an example of that would be, I know that 1 year going back, the Welsh Assembly look at major applications coming through within 8 weeks. Now, we had one major application that we determined outside of 8 weeks, and that was 0%. Had we decided that in 8 weeks, it would have been 100%. So it doesn't make sense statistically on that. So with we report every year, and we publish the report. It goes to the Welsh ministers, published online, and we report to the planning committee, so that when I look at those statistics and we think they say something wrong or they give the wrong impression, we give them a little bit of explanation to it, like we've done on the appeals. So although there's only 4 appeals, and half of them we succeeded, half we didn't, that's still a very low number. And I would concentrate more on the fact that we only had 4 appeals, which is really good for. We've had up to 20 odd appeals per year. The fact that they're quite low means that we are looking to try and approve as many as we can and work with the applicants to get that result.
But what I can remember, the Welsh Government wanted it in percentages, which skews you, it's really unfair on the planning department, really.
Yeah, and we've certainly made those comments to Welsh Government, and their answer to that, and since 2015, is that we now produce a yearly report, and what the government is saying is that, yeah, you may have reasons why your figures are quite low. This is your opportunity to explain why, what has happened to why those figures are low, and if there's any percentage issues like that, we can also explain those. So the percentages are staying, unfortunately, but we are able to provide an explanation when there's some issues like that.
Yeah, I think it's important to make sure that we continue with that narrative about what actually is happening, because the percentages are misleading, really. If you were a cynic, you would say that Welsh Government has another policy which it would like to see introduced, and that is a reduction in the number of planning authorities by enforced combination with others. And, you know, maybe that does make some sense in some ways, although I think the further you take away planning decision-making from the locality, the more remote people will see it, quite rightly. But one suspects that the percentages, you know, 100% failure to get a major application dealt with within the 8 weeks, you know, 50% failure on getting on appeals, is just the sort of statistic which will be used against us, unfortunately. So it's important we keep hammering that narrative. Yeah. Thanks.
Are there any other questions for Richard? No? Well, this is your last opportunity, because I think this is the last topic that Richard will be covering with us today. So unless he wants to stay and listen to the rest of it, you're more than welcome, and we'll excuse you. Thank you, Richard. Okay, Dave, this one's for you. It's the Welsh Audit Office report, Delivering with Less, and the impact on services and citizens. I know we've got another agenda item on Welsh Audit Office, but for this one, this was initially considered in July 2015. Again, we've got the recommendations and the executive member response. But moving to the February update, if you could give us a more up-to-date overview.
Of course, Chair. Thank you very much. Yes, obviously the WAO Delivering with Less report goes back to 2014 now, and they were using data at that time, so we've moved on quite a bit. That was, to remind members, that was a report that looked at reviewing environmental health services, including licensing services. I think one of the main recommendations that came out of that was obviously, it's inferred in the title, really, delivering with less, and some of the main concerns was around the deliverability of frontline services going into the future, around new statutory duties as Welsh Government tends to legislate on things like the Public Health Bill now, and it's done a lot of work on under the Housing Act, which is impacting on public protection services as well as housing. The other issue was around resilience then of those services as well. So really, we did quite a bit of work on this between Blaen y Gwent and Torfaen, as you know, over the last few years. And we didn't start with environmental health services, but we did start with training standards and licensing as part of public protection. And just the history of that is that there was the Gwent Trading Standards project, which members will probably be aware of, which didn't go ahead in the end, largely because of resources difference between the authorities, and when you got to the devil in the detail, it was something that wasn't workable. So we began to collaborate with Blaen y Gwent in relation to trading standard services and licensing, and they've been jointly delivered since October 2015. And pretty successfully. We've now got a trading standards manager covering the two authorities, and we've got a licensing manager covering the two authorities. And that was extended in October 2016, which is when I came on board, and the previous head of public protection retired, of course, and that was then extended to environmental health services. And really, that's really the main outcome for both authorities, really, as a result of the WAO work, the Delivering with Less. We recognised that there were challenges going forward. We were able to make savings on management costs of about an annual equivalent of about £80,000 per authority, and that is the that is about where we are now. I know it was last October, but it still feels like it's very early days, really, in the environmental health collaboration there. Just to add in as well, members, obviously, with the local government white paper recently introduced, public protection services as a whole, this is environmental health, trading standards and licensing, has been put forward for regional working as well. So that sort of changes the landscape a little bit for us as well. So we've had a few shifting sands really on this one, and it continues to be the case. One of the previous recommendations was about looking at a joint procurement system, a joint case management system, a joint IT system, if you like, to deal with the cases for environmental health and trading standards. And that goes back to, you may have read earlier on the word TASCOMI, which was a national procurement framework that local government has. They procured a framework for an alternative IT system for public protection, including environmental health. That was considered. Both authorities, Blanagwent and Torfaen, are on Civica APP, or FLAIR as it was historically known. That was a good procurement project, but it was a little bit rigid when it came down to costs, and we decided not to go ahead with that. The reason being is because it was whatever the size of the local authority, whatever the size of the database that was required, it was one set price for the authority. So Cardiff had the same price as Torfaen, who had the same price as Blanagwent. And when we inquired with them as to whether we could do a bit of a deal, if you like, to get a better, more economically advantageous arrangement, because we were working together as two authorities, and they weren't willing to go against what was the outcome of the framework. And I'll give you an example. There's 3 public protection services that have merged on the south coast of Wales. They call it the SRS, the alternative SRS, not the shared resource services, the shared regulatory services of Cardiff, Bridgend and Vale, and they're all having to pay 15,000 each for the one system. So when we compare that to what we were paying now and the implementation time and cost that it would be, it wasn't economically advantageous for us to go that, because we're only paying £1,000 or so more each per authority for our existing systems. We also looked at whether we could access each other's systems, and this is one of the benefits of the shared resource services, is that from my laptop I can access Blanagwent systems and I can access Torfaen systems. So it's not the smoothest of arrangements, but we can do it, and it's really only the managers that have to do it at this time. Officers can do it if they need to, the frontline officers can do it if they need to, but largely they're still on their own systems. So we've got a little bit of an advantage with SRS, and we need to work through how we can make it smoother. So there wasn't the urgency to save money, and it would be a massive undertaking to do that. The other reason we didn't go with TASCOMI is because at the time the local government landscape was a map. You'll all remember a map that was recently discarded, and there was talk about local authorities merging as well, and it seemed silly to buy a system that we may have to then abandon for a newer system as well. So it's trying to be prudent with local government resources and not invest in something that would have to be aborted. And again, we still have that changing landscape now, and if there's going to be a regional service at some point in the future after legislation, then we need to bear in mind whether it's worth it financially, and whether there's any advantage in doing so in the interim. So we haven't gone with that, and we're okay with where we are. And that's enabled us to continue to work on the resilience of the frontline service. And whilst officers are largely, we still have to go and do what we do in Blanagwent, and we still have to go and do what we do in Torfaen and respond to the complaints. But we are working together around certain projects, working very closely with housing in relation to empty property work, which is a joint initiative. But all the enforcement side really is done by public protection. So we're working jointly across the two authorities on that. And we're working jointly, of course, we're working jointly on the Kingdom initiative, and we're working jointly with the providing resilience on the dog warden services, and also resilience for food. If we get food poisoning outbreaks, we can deploy resources wherever we can. We're also working together on a bit of fly tipping, which is always a thing in any area at the moment. Officers are working between the authorities to potentially install some covert CCT cameras to catch fly tipping in the Torfaen area as well. So, people are still carrying on at the front line, because that's what we all want, that's what the members want, and that's obviously what the public want as well, but we're starting to share knowledge and add value to the service, really, in that sense. So that's where we've gone now. So, as I said in the update there, we can access each other's systems, and we're working together on certain projects and providing resilience. After that, Chair, any further questions I'm happy to take.
Members, any questions?
It seems to be working well. You know, the collaboration is working well, and it's still in its early days, really, isn't it? But no question.
I'd just like to echo what you said, Norm. It is working well. I have reports very often, and I think what members will be pleased about will be the actual working on derelict properties between housing and yourself, because this has been a bone of contention for many years right throughout the borough. You know, it really is getting worse. So I'm glad to see that that's working really well, and hopefully we'll have positive results.
Yeah, I support most of the members of what they're saying. Particularly in the ward that I represent, we had huge problems through the summer, which I contacted Grenada with, about the horses roaming around everywhere. And working with Blaenau Gwent, we have now adopted the policy of Blaenau Gwent, and we do have a policy now. And I think it's a massive step for us, in Torfaen, that we're all working, singing from the same hymn sheet. I think it's a marvellous gesture. Thank you.
Can I just come back in there? Thanks for that, Neil, because it's been long overdue. We were understanding that there was a policy in place when there never was. A Welsh Assembly policy, but not here for Torfaen. So I'd like to thank the officers for the speed in which they've dealt with this. And actually, we've got a policy in place now that hopefully will safeguard the problems that you've had experience in your ward. I'm not saying it will resolve all the problems, but at least there's a policy in place now and we can work through that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Gwylara, and Dave. It's all very reassuring, and it seems to be going in the right direction, so it's welcome news. I'm afraid you're still in the chair. This one is environmental health. It was the review of services initially considered on the 14th of October 2015. I'm looking at the February update. So we've had a February update 2017, and we've got the comments on the impact delivered for 2017. So again, I invite you, David, to give us a little overview on this one.
Thank you, Chair. If I could do an impression of Theresa May a minute, I refer you to the answer I gave a moment ago, really, isn't it, really? Because really, all the good work that was done on the review of the services that we saw earlier on really has culminated in what we've just been talking about, really, which was the collaboration between Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen, and again that paragraph just really reiterates what we said, really, which is that we've gone with business as usual, really, for the frontline services, and cross-authority projects are underway, which we've referred to earlier, around Kingdom, the shared dog warden, Rent Smart Wales. We've worked very jointly and with housing on that, and that's going to be, that's one we didn't discuss earlier, really, isn't it? And so perhaps I'll spend some time on that. What I'm not clear on is the enforcement burden that's going to be for the local authority in that. We were talking about this. I was talking about this with Councillor Clark yesterday. It's a little bit unclear that as to what that burden will be. It'll be for either the single licensing authority and or the local authority to serve fixed penalty notices on those who aren't complying after a while, and we're still awaiting for guidance on that, because it's new legislation. It goes back to what I said earlier around resilience and trying to position ourselves for new statutory functions, which not always, so sometimes there's funding that comes along with it, but it isn't always, and yet the local authority is often expected to pick it up. So I mean, I think that it's early days for Rent Smart Wales, which is, for members who may not be aware, is the new licensing for, it's the new registration requirement for landlords, and it's a licensing for certain other landlords who manage their own properties and for managing agents as well. And members will recall that in addition, with colleagues of Neil's before Christmas, we did a presentation. It was a member briefing on this at that time. So there is that, and that's something we're going to have to play by ear going forward. And there's the empty property where the covert surveillance that I mentioned there, and you know, we need to review the resources. One area that I've not raised before is animal health, although we've touched on it with fly grazing. We need to review really what the need is in Torvine for that, because funding has gone. That was capital. That was what they call the animal health framework grant that Welsh Government used to give us directly, and that seems to have gone away. Mummersey used to provide our animal health. We used to do it in partnership with them, but since that funding has gone away, that's a gap now that we need to look at and try to fill in. There is probably more farms than people realise in the Torvine area that we need to regulate. That's about it really. I'll take any further questions on that, Chair. Thank you.
Gwynair?
Thank you, Chair. I have got concerns about Rent Smart Wales. The financing, obviously the enforcement, and this is something that I would hope, and I'm sure you will, that Scrutiny will keep this on their radar, because I think it's going to be a while before we can feel comfortable with it. I'm certainly not at the moment. I've been to all the meetings with them, and still I've got some very serious concerns. But of course, everything new is set to challenge us, but hopefully you will keep your eye on this one.
We're kind of straying into housing and environmental at the moment. And in view of the Rent Smart Wales thing, I just wonder, are we now getting to the stage where we haven't got a big problem with housing lists? Sorry, Neil, I'm going on to you now. Because I understand Melin, I don't know whether others are doing it, but they are now not implementing the situation where they were managing properties for private landlords. So is it because they say they'll now offer from their stock? Is there less of a problem with Home Seeker now?
No, absolutely not. I think there's some confusion there, I suppose, in terms of there is an existing arrangement in place that Melin supports both Torvine and Monmouthshire, I'm sure, or Plain and Gwent in terms of providing temporary accommodation. The difficulty there is that the subsidy arrangements for housing benefit have changed recently, and which means that there is a pressure on budgets from April. That has meant that the local authorities and those RSLs who have worked in partnership with RSLs, with the local authorities, Melin in this case, have had to very quickly review their arrangements for temporary accommodation, which is a different issue than, I suppose, the Rent Smart Wales exercise. It does. Dave obviously quite rightly mentioned Rent Smart Wales, and there's reference to Rent Smart Wales in the recommendations and the responses to other recommendations in the report later on. You know, the developing the local housing market, for instance, because there is a crossover, and obviously we do work very closely together. So no category that, you know, there is still a severe housing shortage. In particular, there are pressures on smaller units of accommodation. We haven't got enough of them, especially in the north of the borough. We are working very closely with private rented sector landlords, and we are encouraging them to work with us where it makes sense to both them and us, and exploring opportunities for either ourselves or the RSLs to enter into an arrangement whereby we take on responsibility for managing the properties and give a rental income to the landlord, because we've really got a shortage of, as I say, temporary accommodation and opportunities to house people either through Home Seeker directly to Bronavon properties or Merlin properties, but also obviously the latest Housing Act very much encourages local authorities to develop the private rented sector, develop relationships with private sector landlords, and we can discharge our statutory responsibilities for homelessness into the private rented sector where there is a secure, affordable option. So, you know, there's still a lot of pressures in the housing system.
Can I just ask, is there a sort of, are there dates that you say you are being encouraged to do this? Is there a deadline when you are supposed to start doing this? Is there an intention to do it? Or?
So when you mean, when you say this, what do you mean specifically?
Oh, sorry, you were talking about the fact that you are being encouraged to take on, as the RSLs did. If I understood what you said, you were saying you were supposed to work now with private landlords. You're being encouraged. Is there any time that you are going to start doing that?
Yeah, that started from April 2016 with the new Act. Was it 2015? Time flying, but you enjoy yourself. When the new Housing Act came in response to a sort of later recommendation, I've said that we are developing a private rented sector strategy. Within that strategy, there will be specific references to working with the private rented sector, both supporting landlords and supporting tenants within the private rented sector, because I know members of the committee are concerned about, I suppose, inappropriate, I was going to say abuse, but inappropriate management of private rented sector properties. So that's when I suppose the work that both Dave's team and Housing Solutions team do intertwine, I suppose, and interlinked, and that approach is critical. So we have been encouraged since the new Act's been brought into enactment to develop our linkages with the private rented sector. Members will be aware that we have an excellent landlord hub that we work in partnership with Monmouthshire Council on. We have excellent representation from private sector landlords at the hub, which meets on a quarterly basis. And we have developed a suite of leaflets to explain to both landlords and tenants, I suppose, the implications of the Rent Smart Wales element of the Act as well. I think what was being referenced earlier on was obviously we've got some real concerns about the enforcement side, because that's still unclear. But having said that, I think the feedback we've received from the Cardiff, who host the Rent Smart Wales list, the register, for want of a better word, have provided local authorities with feedback, and there has been quite a number of landlords who have registered in Torfaen. So in comparison to other local authority areas, Torfaen isn't doing so badly. Having said that, there's still probably a whole range of landlords out there who probably either haven't registered or don't understand that they have to register. Yeah.
Could I just touch on the review of, going back now to Dave, review of resource needs in Torfaen in relation to food, health, safety, infectious disease and animal welfare. Without resources, you can't really do much. So when will the review take place? And obviously it's down to the budget, what the budget can give you for this work, because it's very important work. And I mean, without resources, it's a bit worrying.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think before I come holding the hat out or wanting more money from the authority, though, I think what I'd like to do with the team manager has been in place now since October, and she's obviously working across the two authorities, and we've identified that we need to do that piece of work, especially for food. Animal health she isn't responsible for, but for food and health and safety. The only reason for that is because before we come cap in hand, really, we need to see whether we can it isn't that staff are to blame, that isn't what we're saying at all, but we need to look at the way staff are working and whether they can work in a different way, and whether we can look at the resources across environmental health as a whole and see whether we can change the deployment from one team to another to make sure that we're doing that. Because otherwise I'm coming for a growth item without really having reviewed what we've got there and what we've done. And of course, the backdrop is further financial challenges going forward. And really then, once we've done that, we can put a case together if we need to, and then we can, that's when the tough decisions come with the authority, really, about whether it's prepared to tolerate statutory duties that we're not maintaining. And when it comes to food and health and safety, that can, that lack of enforcement, if there is one, is going to snowball and could have potential problems in the future. And not only that, it's a reflection of the authority as well. Obviously, it reflects on food hygiene ratings and things like that. And we get lots of freedom of information requests and things like that these days. But the most important thing is to see whether can we better protect public health with the resources that we've got. And if we can't have a growth item, then we'll have to tolerate a risk. And if you can, I think the other part of your question was when will that be done? It'll have to be done very, very soon. Animal health is a different kettle of fish because if we go back to Blaenau Gwent for a second, it's an area that we identified as a challenge a few years ago, and we brought in Powys Council's services. That's why the flag raising policy is actually a three-council policy: Powys, Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen, that we developed when the Control of Horses Act, Wales Act, came in 2014. That was a response to specific problems that Blaenau Gwent had with flag raising and abandoned horses on the commons. So that's where that was developed, and we've been able to adopt it here, and we're looking to implement it as best as we can. So animal health is a slightly different area, is that we don't necessarily have the skills and the knowledge in-house. So we'll need to consider that in a different way, and obviously I've had discussions with the Chief Officer on that as well. And again, it's about options and what risks we're prepared to tolerate as we go now and as we go forward. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions, members?
Just in that same one, really, the point too, we know that the pest control had to be discontinued. Do you think this has had a particular impact?
Yeah, early days here yet, because what we've had to do is we've had to put some new codes into our FLAIR system I mentioned earlier to try to measure the impact in a better way. Because what we're probably getting is as a result of not having a service, we are seeing more enforcement and officers having to go out, and where we in the past we'd have just treated, officers are having to go out, and there isn't a treatment service anymore. So there's always the potential for more enforcement action, and that's my experience where it's happened elsewhere also.
Sorry, are we going to keep monitoring that to see whether it is cost effective then to stop it, or because it could be that it'll cost us more in the long run to deal with the problems that have been caused?
I think we certainly need to monitor it, but again, it's down to cost, isn't it? And how you weigh that up, and what value and importance you put on that service. I think it's a valuable service, but it's one that we have to look at in the future, really.
Thank you, Gwynaira. Thank you, Neil and David. It seems that some of these topics are actually, because of the in-depth response and the very thorough response to the both you're giving, they're starting to sort of overlap slightly. However, I need to deal with each one on its own merits, but if there's anything for Neil on the developing local housing market, private rental sector, PRS, that is a topic that you've already touched on, and I wondered if there's anything else you wish to add.
Thanks, Chair. No, nothing really. I think I covered as a further update, I suppose, in what I said to the previous question or previous recommendation. Thanks.
Any questions from members on that specific scrutiny item?
Could I just ask, the PRS strategy is in the process of being drafted and will be consulted upon in due course. Have you got a rough time scale for that?
Yeah, hopefully we'll have a draft that we can circulate within the next 6 weeks or so. I was going to suggest that if the timings were right, obviously, that we could feed that into the potential work programme for the committee's 2017-18 work programme, I suppose. So if not, if the timescales don't allow, then I'll certainly gladly circulate a copy of the draft strategy to members of the committee, sort of virtually, for feedback and comment. But if we can, if the timescales do allow us to, then say we can certainly feed that the opportunity into the work programme for next year's scrutiny committee.
Any other questions, members? Okay, again, this one's back to you, Dave, and it's, I think we've already touched on this one, but it's got its own standalone scrutiny, which was the trading standards collaboration with Blaenau Gwent CBC, and members have already seen the older updates, but they're more interested now in how things are progressing. I know you've touched on it, but is there anything you wish to add to the item itself?
No, I think that really it's covered there, really. The joint IT system, I think we've touched on all that, really. The other thing I would say is that it's a year ahead of the environmental health side of it, so it's far more well established. Staff, you know, but very often I go down and I go to T-Blaen and I see a member of staff from Blaenau Gwent there, and they're working and they're talking about cases, and they really are helping each other out on if you like, undercover operations and things like that, because Blaenau Gwent staff won't be known in Torvine and vice versa as well. So they really are working well together. It's really pleasing to see. There's been a joint work plan in place now for well, throughout the duration of the collaboration, and yes, I think it's working very, very well. We've had members of staff retire, and we've been able to replace them, which has been a result given the financial climate. And no, I think there's been some successes with out of those operations we've had successes in relation, especially in the lead up to Christmas. There's a significant increase in sort of counterfeit sales through Facebook and the use of the internet, really, and they're using that data to go undercover from time to time and to do some excellent stings, if you like, which are ending up in prosecution. So no, and we look forward to hopefully being able to maintain that service level going forward, because those are the real challenges for the future, really. Just a couple of bits and bobs. We're working cross-boundary on food standards work. We've been able to do a bit of catch-up work again on food standards inspections there. And members may not be aware that another part of work that Training Standards do is on inspecting food premises and other premises for animal feed. Some food premises use some of their waste and send it off to feed establishments and things like that. And obviously, if you've got animal feed factories and things like that in the area, that was a challenge due to resources. And what happened there was the Food Standards Agency actually managed to persuade the WLGA and Welsh Government to actually take the budget for animal feed, which was very small in this area and in Blaenau Gwent, it was hardly anything, to take it out and they give it to the Food Standards Agency, and they've passed it back to local government, and we deliver that regionally now. So Blaenau Gwent and Torvine officers, employed training standards officers, are also doing this work here, and they're doing it around the Gwent area as well. And for each inspection they get paid from the Welsh Government then to actually do that, and that's certainly improved because it's pooling knowledge and resources there as well, really. So that's an example of the work they've done. But they do excellent work. It's always very interesting when they bring me a prosecution case, because yeah. Okay. After that, Chair, if there's any questions, obviously.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Dave. This is back to Neil now. Again, you've touched on this. Joint Housing Solutions Service, Collaboration Impact Analysis. And I know from the report that there's regular updates to the Executive Member, Gwenera, as appropriate. But is there anything else you wish to add to the progress updates that you've done since February?
No, I suppose the update covers most of the issues there. Just to confirm, as I made reference to the landlord hub earlier on, and I say that goes from strength to strength in terms of engaging with private sector landlords. The customer feedback surveys that we conduct with our customers really does provide us with good feedback about the services, and that helps us to continuously review what we do and how we do things, etc., and to make improvements where we can. Obviously, and we put in place arrangements to regularly brief Cabinet Member on progress within the housing service.
Thank you, Neil. Any questions from members? Anything you wish to add, Gwenera? Happy? Okay.
I was just going to ask the Executive Member, are you satisfied with the progress? With the yes, yeah.
Yes, I am. I have to be fair. I think the officers work very, very hard under difficult circumstances. Obviously, we have a huge shortage of homes. I mean, this week alone, I don't know whether anyone's checked the Home Seeker, but actually it's only 21 properties available, and we have close on 2,800 people on them. And I realise they're not all applying for properties, but I would think that possibly over 300 would be for 21 properties, and there's not one family home on there. They're all flats. So, you know, it is difficult, but I'm pleased with the progress that our officers make. They're working to the best of their ability.
Thank you. This just remains now one last one for Neil on this particular agenda item, and it's development of the next local housing strategy 2017 to 2020, a 3-year long. If you'd like to give us an overview since February.
Yeah, just to confirm, I suppose we're at a very similar stage in the development of the strategy as we are with the private rented sector strategy. So, again, if timescales allow, I would suggest that we try to feed in, as part of the Scrutiny Committee's work programme for next year, an opportunity to consider a draft of the next local housing strategies to give members an opportunity to feed in into its development. Obviously, there was a report that came in December which sort of scoped out, I suppose, the areas that would probably be included within the new local housing strategy, and largely they're probably not going to vary. The themes are not going to vary very much from the existing strategy, which comes to an end this year. But we are going into increasingly difficult times, I think, in particular with housing supply, as I said earlier on, and austerity measures and welfare benefit reforms, universal credit, etc., and impact on under 35s, young single people, etc. So it is, you know, it's increasingly challenging. So I welcome the feedback from members and see if the timescales allow for us to submit the opportunity for scrutiny of the draft local housing strategy over the next 6 months.
Members, do you have any questions? Anything you wish to add? No? Neil, thank you very much for your input today. And I think that concludes agenda item 5, I think. 5? Yeah. And Neil, please excuse. Thank you.
Could I just say something, Chair? Obviously, this is my first visit to the Scrutiny Committee, so I thank you very much for inviting me. It probably would be my last. But having said that, we do value your recommendations, your input. It means so much to us, and that's the way that we can work together closely. So I wouldn't want anyone to think for 1 minute that what you do here isn't absolutely crucial to the way we work as Cabinet. Your work is so important to us. So thank you for that. Thank you for the way you've dealt with housing, planning and public protection. And I wish you all the best for the future.
Well, thank you very much for those kind words, Gwraera. And I know the committee ourselves over the last year, we've had some really meaty ones that we've got our teeth into. And we do feel that what we are actually contributing does go much further than this committee. It does get actioned, and we make a difference. And I can only honestly say, on behalf of the committee, thank you for everything that you've done over the past year, and for all the years that you've served as a councillor and as executive member. And we wish you well with whatever you do next, and I'm sure you're going to be putting your feet up, zipping your slippers up, and hopefully having some well-earned holidays. You needed it. Dave, we need your experience on this last one, I can assure you now.
I just want to say that when I printed off the agenda, I may not have it.
I'm also mindful, Neil, the clock, and you're more than welcome if you want to sit in for 10 minutes of this, if you feel it's beneficial, or... Sorry, I'll just cover it. Agenda item 6, committee, is the updated report progress against adopted action plans, and our suggested scrutiny activity is we're invited to scrutinise the actions and updates addressing each recommendation made by external auditors, to review the progress against adopted action plans referred to and considered by the committee, and identify and outline concerns regarding progress made and make relevant recommendations or comments for consideration by the audit committee through an annual progress report. Appendix 1 contains the scrutiny items, and if you want me to go through in the same format as before, Dave, are you happy?
Yes, thank you. I was getting mixed up with this report and the previous one we had on the WAO review, so I thought we'd covered them both. But,
okay, well, this one is the WAO review, Delivering with Less, and it's the impact on environmental health services and citizens, and it was noted and referred by Audit Committee in June 2015. And the target date we have is to update to audit for assurance purposes for March 2017. We've got, obviously, the accepted recommendations and proposals and the update for March 2017. If there's anything that you wish to add to that.
No, Chair. Again, the infograms, as was in February last year, were done, and that made the link to the national strategic priorities. I don't know if members had the opportunity to view them at the time. They can always be circulated again if we need to. And obviously, when we develop our plans for the future, as well as our local priorities, we'll be doing them in relation to national priorities. So really, there hasn't been any more work done on that. The best practice standards are really not a matter for individual authorities. They are a matter for what we used to call our technical panels, which changed the name to expert panels. So members may or may not be for all the areas of environmental health. There's a professional network that shares knowledge and experience, and
develops, it helps consistency amongst other things, they have developed the previous best practice standards. So, for example, there's a food safety technical panel which will have sub-panels underneath it. There's a health and safety technical panel which the previous head of public protection here used to chair, and there's ones for pollution, dog and litter issues and pest control. And in addition, the private sector housing technical panel, the expert panel, feeds into, and all these panels feed into the Welsh Heads of Environmental Health, which is then under the Directors of Public Protection. So that work is ongoing. I'd have to check with the service leads exactly where we are with them, but they're regularly updated. So that's that one. I don't know if you want me to. Do you want to take questions on that, or shall I move through the report? Yeah. Okay. The other one then is providing scrutiny chairs and members. Well, obviously I've only been in since October, and we had the scrutiny in relation to environmental enforcement that we have already discussed, and so there's no further update really on the February 16 update. And then moving through engagement with local residents over the planned budgets. I'm sure what was done in February 16 was repeated in relation to, if we move forward to the following page, in relation to the fees and charges, we regularly review them to maximise income where we can, and there is the annual citizens engagement that is undertaken. So since I've been in post, we haven't really done any more on that than what's already done through the sort of corporate planning processes. Then we get into improving efficiency and value for money. We've done work already on statutory and non-statutory for functions and which ones we should keep in. Members will be aware that public protection services and environmental health are very much statutory, and we touched on a pest control treatment service earlier. That's one of the that was, I'm sure, one of the reasons that was discontinued is that it is a discretionary service. So the update really on that is again, we come back to the collaboration and outsourcing really, and the merger of the public protection services that's been going on since October 15 with environmental health in 16 really. And as I just mentioned over, we've updated the service standards in early mid 2016, and obviously really the main activity out of this is the merger with Blaenau Gwent. Improving the strategic planning, we undertake the corporate, through the corporate system, this health evaluation process, and we've then also already put in place the work plans for the teams, the service plans, if you like, for both environmental health, two for environmental health, one for commercial food and health and safety and infectious disease, and another one for public health or pollution, and then one for trade and standards and one for licensing. And what we've tried to do with those, with the collaboration, is to make sure as far as practicable that they are the same for both authorities, so that because very much there's always a bit of local difference. The public space protection orders we'll be doing here this year, but we won't be doing in Blaenau Gwent because it's already been completed. And then really I've updated again on the joint issue with Tascombe that I've already alluded to, Chair, really, and the reasons why we're not proceeding with that. So if there's any further questions, Chair, I'd be happy to field them.
Members, any questions?
I suppose a general one, the merger of the two departments seems to have worked pretty well in terms of maintaining services in both areas, and hopefully management costs have been reduced as a consequence. To what extent, if any, could consideration be given to further collaboration with other authorities, providing that it doesn't impact on service delivery?
and the backdrop really is the white paper and the public protection being as a regional service there. I think the advantage we've had, if we go back one step and we think about the Gwent Trading Standards project that was discontinued, and that was discontinued largely because of the different resources between the local authorities, and there was a fear once we got down into the devil's always in the detail. When we got down into that, there was a fear that because there's various resource levels between the authorities in Gwent, of which there's 5 obviously, that one authority may be subsidising another. The advantage we've had with this collaboration is that we're largely the same. We've got very similar resource levels, although not exactly the same. And we've got, it's also held that we've got very similar terms and conditions of employment as well. So, and that we've maintained those. There isn't one authority hosting the service. It's largely quite a loose collaboration at this time to achieve the benefits that we've had, and as we mentioned earlier, to maintain the front line. I think when we move, if we move in a loose collaboration into working with other authorities in Gwent, then there will be various, but if let's just say we start to talk to one other authority and they have significantly less resources than Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen has, then I think there will be concerns raised about whether one authority will be subsidising another. And then of course we have to take into account the wishes of the council taxpayers and the fact that they'll be paying, and it becomes a bigger beast really. So I think that's a real challenge going forward. The only way to do it is to then really start thinking about one authority hosting it, and that's what's happened on the south coast, where you've got Cardiff, the Vale in the middle, and Bridgend, and the Vale hosts the service. And what they do then is it's almost like a contractor-provider relationship, and everybody has a slightly different service level. I haven't got into the detail of that, but I'm given to understand that everybody has a slightly different service level agreement, so that if then there's a reduction in the resources available, then the contract will change and certain things won't be done that are already being done. So I think it's possible, but it'll probably need to go down that road, and then we're talking about formalising it. We're talking about we're talking about what each authority is prepared to pay for to a host authority. Who that host authority is, of course, will be a challenge and a debate, and then of course it'll be service level agreements. So I think the bigger it gets, the harder it gets, and the more complex it gets. I think that it depends on the outcome of the white paper going forward. Really, if my own personal view now, and this is not a view of the authority, but if it's a lot easier if you've got merged authorities with one treasurer, one set of members, one set of council taxpayers, really, and then obviously you've got one service being provided across the areas. But that seems to be off the agenda now, really. Yeah.
It does look as though that government intervention is off the agenda for the moment, though there are reserve powers which might allow them to bring it back on the agenda. But I just wanted to get a feel, really. You're not looking to expand necessarily, because you need to make the best of what we've got now. But if it comes along, there are challenges, and from your perspective, they would need to be dealt with properly if we were to look at further collaboration.
Absolutely, and I think that we would need to consider hosting between the two authorities, and I think we'd need to in the first instance, and obviously we've had that with the SRS, with the Shared Resources Service, and there will be other examples. And I know that Torfaen has often worked very closely with Monmouthshire on other things like revenues and benefits and things like that. So there's other examples, and there's models out there of collaboration. I think it's something we're going to need to have a look at in due course, but it's largely a matter perhaps for chief executives and leaders of councils and other higher ups, if you like, rather than just little old me, really, on that one, if you don't mind me saying somewhat light-heartedly.
Thank you, Dave. There's just one thing for me, reassurance. Against the background of the Welsh Audit Office action plan, do you feel that there is sufficient progress being made? And if not, what are those real outstanding issues or concerns that you have against that action plan that you, or do you think everything's going smoothly at the moment?
I think there's many items on there. It was hard to decipher from the report because there were many. It was a national review, and it put a local slant on it then, and it talked about a lot of work and working more closely with the members, really. I guess that's around costs and performance information, really. So I guess the question's perhaps for members to a certain extent, really, as to whether they feel more. I think it's a balance between what we can physically provide and what time is available. And what information members want, because service planning going forward is obviously going to be a major issue as we, the settlements come through year on year, in between now and whenever really. So it's a question. I don't think I think there's always room for improvement on it. We have. I was just in a meeting with a member of staff this morning where we talked about a performance template. I think we can improve on presenting performance information over, and I think members will need that going forward when they're making difficult decisions about the budgets. So there is that. But I think that we Ballymont and Torvan have responded very, very positively to it because of small authorities, resource restrictions, and the fact that we've been able to do a couple of the main things, which is to collaborate on services and generate the resilience. How sustainable that is will, now that we've made the savings around the management costs, for example, will depend on what budget challenges are presented to me in the future for the two authorities, and of course the general direction that the leaderships of both authorities want to go in light of the white paper as well. So the answer is, I think we've done a lot, but I don't think we've totally satisfied every box to be ticked. I think some of those were national, and maybe they've not been picked up by the WLGA as well as they could be. I do think that it's an old report now, and whilst we've responded well, I do think it's largely been superseded now. I think it's largely been superseded by the challenges around local government reorganisation when we had a map, and obviously now with the white paper as well. So in trying to look forward, we need to make sure we bring the members with us with relevant performance information, and so that everybody's satisfied that they know the consequences, or that they know the risks, if you like, about the come with the budgetary challenges that we had and the risks associated with having to downsize service. What I personally wouldn't want is that, as budget cuts come through, is that we're salami slicing, because that to me is, I think we're at a position now where we've got good services across the two authorities, but to salami slice even more would almost be a drive to mediocrity. We'd be cutting it back, that we're almost becoming unresponsive. So I think we need to focus on what it is we're going to be doing in the future, and what we're not going to be doing in the future, rather than having to cut back services to the point where people are stretched. The services are considered by members and others to be unresponsive, and as a result, we're getting staff sickness and stress and things like that, really. Hope that's answered it to a certain extent. Thank you.
I appreciate you enlightening the committee as to your concerns, but I'm pretty reassured that in difficult times that you seem to finger on the pulse, and you're dealing and reactively day to day by the sound of it. So is there anything you wish to add, Liz? No? Well, thanks very much for today's input, Dave. It's been very thorough, very enlightening, and I appreciate your time, and thank you very much. Okay, committee. It's now our time where we need to shine. Yeah. I don't need to go over the actual what we're here to do. We know why we're here. Invite you to review the impact, timescales and progress as detailed with the report. Members, is there any thoughts or things you need to add to any recommendations? We've addressed our concerns at each and every one. So asked some very thorough questions. The response was very thorough. I'm more than happy with what's been said today. Is there anything for you, Brian? Yeah.
I've just got a few points really too that I picked up within the meeting. Neil Howell, it's sort of a point to note for the future for the committee, I guess. Neil Howell recommended the draft private rented sector strategy be put into the committee's work programme for 17-18, as well as, I think he said, the local housing strategy as well. So that's just a point to note for the future, and for it to not go off our radar. I think Councillor Morby, this is in relation, to the first report that we received, the update report on progress and impact of accepted regs. I think Councillor Morby, you said it was important to reiterate and put the planning appeal figures into context because the figures paint a poor picture of the authority's performance when dealing with such a small amount of applications going to appeal. So again, that's just to know. And I think overall, the sort of wording I put together at the end for conclusion was members were satisfied with the progress made by the relevant officers to implement their recommendations made by this committee. Okay. And then on the second report, the update report, progress against adopted action plans, at the end, Dave come up with some good points which you may want to consider and put forward as a recommendation. He said that he felt that Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen responded quite positively in relation to the action plan. So I don't know whether you just want to reiterate that back to the audit committee for assurance purposes.
To appease the chair of the audit committee, we will do that.
There's certainly, he said, a balance of what we can provide and what's being provided. And this WAO report now, he felt, superseded by other challenges and requirements taking place in local government now. So I don't know whether that's the sort of wording you'd like to put forward as a recommendation to the audit committee, but I'll certainly compile something and email you for approval.
Sounds good to me. I think that's a very good, really, synopsis of what we've heard today.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, no, thanks, Leanne, for, I know it says on there. I know we've got to choose. It says the date of the next meeting. That's not practicable now because obviously there's something going on May the 4th or wherever. But thanks very much for everything over the year, and thanks for attending today. And good luck in the forthcoming election. And I know you're standing down, but.